Hello, everybody. I'm Parsha Becky, and we are back for another week of Parsha. As I'm sure you recall, we are currently still in the middle of reading the first book of Chumash, the book of Bereishit, though maybe not for much longer. Bereishit means at the start. We are at the start of the Torah, at the start of the world, and at the start of our story. This week's Parsha is called Vayechi, which means he lived. And the Parsha is called Vayechi, he lived, because it starts off by telling us that Yaakov lived in Egypt for 17 years, which brings his entire lifespan to a total of 147 years. And near the end of Yaakov's life, he calls Yosef over to him. And Yosef comes to Yaakov's bedside, and Yaakov says, I need you to promise me something. I need you to promise me that at the end of my life, you will not allow me to be buried in Egypt. I want to be buried in Israel and not just anywhere. Promise me that you will take my body back to Israel, to Me'arat HaMachpelah, the cave, the burial cave that Abraham bought way back when, earlier in Bereishit, back in Parshat Vayechi, where Abraham and Sarah are buried, where Yitzchak and Rivka are buried, and where I, Yaakov, have buried Leah. I will be buried beside my wife, with my father and my grandfather in Me'arat HaMachpelah. And Yosef says, I promise I will do that. Great. He leaves. He goes back to work. And again, Yosef gets called to Yaakov's bedside. He gets told, it's near the end of Yaakov's life. He wants to bless you and your children. So Yosef comes with his two sons, Menashe and Ephraim, to Yaakov's bedside. And he introduces his kids to Yaakov. He's like, hey, Dad, these are my kids. The older kid, Menashe, the younger kid, Ephraim. Great kids. Nice to meet their grandfather. And Yaakov says, hey, Yosef, it's so wonderful to get to be here with your children, my favorite son's children. And in fact, I know they're your kids, they're technically my grandkids, but I want you to know that to me, it's as if Menashe and Ephraim are my own children. It's as if they're my own kids in terms of being counted among the tribes of Israel. They're among the 12 tribes, even though technically it should be you, but you're just one person. I want to double your portion. So you get 2 kids, 2 tribes. And in terms of each getting their own portion of land in the land of Israel, again, they each count separately so that you get double because you're my favorite and because they're special and I love them so much and I love you so much. And bring them closer. I want to give them a bracha. So Yaakov puts out his hands and Yosef brings his children over and he puts his older son Menashe under Yaakov's right hand and his younger son Ephraim under Yaakov's left hand. But then Yaakov crosses his hands. And Yosef's like, no, Dad, you got it wrong. Don't cross your hands. Yosef uncrosses his hands. And Yaakov recrosses his hands with his right hand over Ephraim and his left hand over Menashe. And Yosef's like, no, you got it wrong, Dad. Menashe's older. You should be putting your strong right hand over the more important older kid. And Yaakov's like, no. I know who's older. That's okay. I'm not confused about that. But I also know, as special as you are, Menashe, you're going to have a wonderful life, a wonderful future, a wonderful legacy. Ephraim's going to be even more famous and even more important. So I'm putting my important right hand, I'm right-handed, I'm putting my right hand on Ephraim's head, because Ephraim is the one who's actually going to be more famous. And my left hand is still a good hand over Menashe. Menashe, you're great too, you're just not as famous as your brother. And with his hands crossed like that, right hand on Ephraim, left hand on Menashe, Yaakov gives Ephraim and Menashe his special bracha. He says, Hashem, who is with me, and with my fathers, should be with you, with both of you, and should bless you, and keep you safe, and help you to multiply in the land of Israel. And he also blesses them. He says that, all the Jewish people should bless their children by saying that they should be like Ephraim. He says Ephraim first, and like Menashe. And in fact, we do this. This is exactly what we do. There is a blessing on the children that parents give their children, often before lighting Shabbat candles or at other times. And the version that we say for boys does say Hashem should make you like Ephraim and Menashe. So that is exactly the bracha we use. And he blesses Yosef's kids. Yosef bows to him and thanks him. And then Yaakov calls all his kids over. And he says, I'm going to give each one of you a bracha because it's near the end of my life. And he gives a special bracha to each one of the kids. Some are kind of like trash talk brachas where he's like, hey, I'm mad at you. You once did something that made me mad. And I haven't forgotten, even though I'm really old now. I'm still mad. So it's some of them are kind of is it a bracha? Is it not a bracha? But he calls them a bracha. And he blesses each kid. He gives each kid their own little special words of wisdom. And Yaakov passes away. Before he does, he again tells all his kids, he's like, hey, I know I'm about to die. I need you to, again, all promise me you will bury me in Me'arat HaMachpelah, nowhere else, with Leah, with Yitzchak and Rivka and Avraham and Sarah. I got to be buried there. And the kids all promised. Yaakov passes away. He is embalmed in Egypt, which is basically the process they do to like preserve a body, similar to making mummies, to keep the body nice and non-smelly while they transport him all the way up to Israel to be buried. The embalming process takes 40 days, and beyond that, everyone in Egypt mourns for Yaakov, and they cry, and they're sad that Yaakov is gone for a full 70 days. And then Yosef asks Pharaoh for permission. He's like, hey, listen, I know that I've got this important job here in Egypt, and I'm not trying to skip out on that, but my father asked me to make him a very important promise that I would bury him in Israel, in Me'arat HaMachpelah, in this special grave site, family grave site, where his wife is buried, and his father and mother are buried, and his grandfather and grandmother are buried. So can I please go and bury Yaakov there? And Pharaoh's like, yes, of course, you're my best friend, Yosef, whatever you need. Pharaoh sends wagons and sends all sorts of important Egyptian dignitaries go with Yosef and his brothers and their family to bury Yaakov in Israel. They bring Yaakov up into Israel, and once they're in Israel, they pause for a week, they sit Shiva, and all the people are like, whoa, these Egyptians are really sad about something. They don't know that it's not Egyptians, it's Jewish people, but whatever, they're confused. They've got a lot of famous Egyptians with them. So they go up to Me'arat HaMachpelah, and they bury Yaakov in Me'arat HaMachpelah beside Leah, with Avraham and Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka, just like he asked them to, just like they promised. And then they come back home to Egypt. And at this point, Yosef's brothers are kind of worried, and they're like, hey guys, now that dad's not around to like keep us all in line, we're scared that Yosef is actually still secretly mad at us for, trying to kill him and then selling him into slavery. What a thing to be still mad about. And we're kind of worried that he's going to get revenge on us now that Yaakov's not here. So the brothers send a message to Yosef. They're like, oh, we forgot to mention, before Dad died, before Yaakov died, he told us to tell you that you have to forgive us for being terrible to you. Because, we're family. We're all, we worship the same God. We're all part of the same family. So, you should go easy on us and forgive us. He totally, definitely said that to us to tell to you. No reason why he didn't say it to you personally. And Yosef's like, guys, you think I'm still mad at you? I told you. I have forgiven you. Look, I understand it wasn't really you who brought me to Egypt. It was God. It was Hashem. I understand Hashem has brought me here to have good things happen so that I could save everybody's lives and become the boss of all of Egypt. So, don't worry. I'm going to keep taking care of you. We're family. It's behind us. And Yosef keeps taking care of his brothers, of their families. And Yosef lives to the age of 110. He gets to hang out with his great-grandkids, so that's very nice. And at the end of Yosef's life, he turns to his brothers and the rest of his family who's around. He's like, listen, guys, I know eventually Hashem is going to take us all out of Egypt. When that happens, promise me you will take my body out of Egypt and bury me in Israel. I want to be buried in Israel. So they promise him that. And at the end of Yosef's life, he is embalmed in Egypt to keep his body in nice, good condition, so that eventually, when the Jewish people leave Egypt, they can take Yosef with and bury him in Israel. That is the end of not only Parshat Vayechi, but also the entire book of Bereishit. Congratulations. Next week we'll be starting the next book of Torah. And of course, there's something we say when we finish reading a book of Torah. We can say it all together now. We're going to say Chazak, Chazak, Venit Chazek, which means strong, strong, and we will make ourselves strong, because learning Torah makes us stronger. And we know that we are so strong from reading this whole book of Bereishit since we started our Parsha cycle this year on Simchat Torah. And we're going to make ourselves even stronger by learning even more Torah next week on this channel when we begin the book of Shemot. Shabbat Shalom.